Download the AllStar app. Make your picks for UFC fights, challenge your friends, level up and win prizes. Link in description. Get it now. Okay, so this weekend, PFL Super Fight, the second pay-per-view of for PFL this year. I think it's the only second pay-per-view they've had
Oh wow.
ever.
Damn.
I believe so. We had one before, but pay-per-views, man, it's hard to do in sports, in combat sports. Especially when you're competing against like the UFC, and that's who their main target is. PFL really focused on the UFC,
Mm-hmm.
and Francis, like I said, Francis is making this PFL debut after like I think it's been 3 years.
Damn.
The last time he fought in
Yeah,
MMA,
you're right.
and that was against
It's been a.
Cyril Gahn for the UFC heavyweight
That's right.
title.
It's been a while.
Um, yeah, it's been a long time, man. Which is I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but it's a good thing for PFL because they get one of their main stars to actually compete. You know what I mean? Because a lot of people thought that he wasn't going to come back to MMA after boxing, because boxing pays so much and it's very lucrative. He took 2 fights in boxing, lost both of them, but he fought the best in the world, right? He fought Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury.
Mm,
So there's nothing you can say negative. I wouldn't say nothing negative about Francis Ngannou, man. He chased after his dreams,
mm-hmm.
and he's getting paid handsomely. So nothing bad to say about that.
Yeah.
But ahead of some, I think both of those fights, Dana White had made some announcements, and this time around, the PFL founder Don Davis, puts out a tweet saying that he's wondering, like, look, it says Don Davis in his tweet, says PFL Super Fight Week. Francis Ngannou makes his highly anticipated return to PFL. So what will Dana White announce to try to steal the spotlight from the biggest fight of 2024?
Mm.
Okay, now, come on, biggest fight of 2024. Come on. And number two, he's actually tagging Dana White in it. So he wants to get Dana White's attention,
Yeah.
right? This is all like warfare. This is all like mental warfare. This is all promotion. And there's a lot of people feel a certain way about it, but I think it's all fair. Like whatever Dana White's doing is fair. Whatever he's doing is fair. Talk crazy
Mm-hmm.
because number one, promotion is all about drawing attention to whatever you're doing,
Yeah.
whatever fight you're promoting, and
Right.
and this is what Don Davis is doing. That's what Dana White does, and he's been doing it for a long time. What do you think of this? This whole like little back and forth between two of the two of the promotion heads.
Yeah, I think it's a smart promotional decision, to be honest. So if you're PFL, right, it's like, and you want to get some of that impression share, that market share from the UFC, definitely call them out. Give them something relevant for them to discuss, right? So people can keep the conversation going. Next thing you know, you've got more attention than you otherwise would have had if you were just promoting it for the sake of promoting it with no mention of other organizations or anything like that. So I think it's a smart move on his part. Um, I'm not sure if it's always in the UFC's best interest, because they have the most market share in the industry. But for any other promotion out there, it's probably a good idea to just kind of like ride the waves of that a little bit, just so you can get more people interested. So I think that's a good move on
Well,
his part. Um, to my knowledge, I'm not sure. Has Dana responded to it? Do you know if yeah? Do you know if there's any? Yeah, sometimes.
he wouldn't respond to it.
Okay.
Like he never, whenever he talks about the PFL, he just the last time I remember him saying anything was maybe a couple weeks ago about like how they're bleeding money
Mm,
and they're in bad they're in bad they're in bad
okay.
position, right? They're in a really bad position right
Yeah.
now. But going back to like Don Davis, right? His tweet is saying like, what is Dana White going to announce? But the week before, ahead of the last pay per view, right? Was it 306?
Mm-hmm.
Was it 307?
307 was the
Yeah, I
last
think
one. Yeah.
307.
Yeah.
Yeah, the last pay per view, right? Kayla Harrison was fighting on that card, and before that fight week, PFL puts up a post about like how PFL, Larissa Pachenko, who's the champion who actually beat Kayla Harrison, they did this whole like highlight package reel about like how
Ah.
Kayla Harrison lost to her ahead of her. So it's like
yeah.
he's kind of contradicting himself in
Yeah,
there,
it
right?
goes
Because
both
PFL did the
ways.
same
Yeah, you
thing.
can kind of like ride, you can kind of ride the hype train. Like, especially like, that's a great way to stay relevant, if Kayla Harrison's fighting, then oh, here's the last person who to beat Kayla Harrison, and she fights, later a few weeks down the line or something like that. That's smart. That's the same playbook. I don't. It's like, yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about someone complaining about somebody else when you're using the same playbook to promote yourself, right? It's
Yeah,
just like, oh, they just have a bigger following than you, so now you can paint them as the bully. But outside of that, it's like, well, you guys are doing the same thing.
exactly, man. Like they're doing the same exact thing. They're all contradicting themselves. Like that's part of the game. You contradict. Like you do something and you think it's right at that moment, and then a couple months later, you do exact opposite, and then blame them for doing exactly what you did
Yeah.
a couple months ago or a couple weeks ago. It's just that's what the game is because people forget quick. You know what I mean? Like,
Hmm.
you know, maybe for us, we don't, but like, like I don't even remember what kind of announcements Dana White made ahead of the other Francis Ngannou fight. I think it was like the Max Holloway. I don't know. Maybe it was the BMF title fight. I don't know. I don't really remember to be honest with you because
Yeah, I
this sport goes by so
it
fast.
does. Like I so when Don Davis mentioned that, oh, like Dana always has a big announcement, like leading up to one of our big announcements, I was like, huh, I never noticed that, right? I never thought that was a thing. It would make sense, but because like he does, there are a lot of announcements, right? Like if you're pretty much, if you go through seasonal streaks of pretty much setting up a pay per view, let's say every 2 weeks or something like that, you're gonna have a big announcement on a regular basis, right? So it's not like, maybe it is intentional. Who knows? Like I'm not in those rooms with Dana talking to his like PR team or whatever, but it's like he's gonna have big announcements regardless of who fights in what promotion when. So it's one of those strange things where it's like, sure, there could be some motive behind it, but it could also just be that just by sheer volume of having news to share, it just seems like it's being overshadowed.
Yeah, and also like the MMA media, they make headlines out of
Oh yeah.
everything. Like you could make up complete lies, and there will be headlines created off complete lies. And
Absolutely.
and Don Davis tweeting that out, he's almost like drawing more attention to Dana White and saying like, "Hey, Dana, announce something because you're gonna if you have something, announce it for us because we want to hear it." Right? It's almost like he's
uh,
opening the door for Dana to like announce something big or something.
yeah.
And let's be honest, like whatever Dana White announces, it's always going to draw attention, right? Whatever fight it is, whatever announcement it is, going to draw attention, man. Over Don Davis. Don Davis is a new guy in the game. Like nobody even knew who he was until PFL like put him in this position to where he's been like the figurehead of the promotion now. But clearly he doesn't know as much about the sport. Like if you listen to some of the interviews and some of the things he says, it's very clear that he doesn't know about the sport like Dana does.
Mm,
Dana's been in the game longer than anybody,
right.
right? And he saved the game. He saved the sport from becoming like who knows what the sport would have been if the UFC wasn't bought
Yeah,
and then the UFC kind of just dissolved, and then what would have happened? We never know,
that's
right?
true. Yeah,
There was other promotions.
he's done a lot for the sport. Like looking back and stuff from the early days of the UFC, when like to the rise that it has now. I remember there was a headline, probably definitely over a decade ago, but there was one weekend, I think, where the pay-per-view or the viewership numbers or something, I forget which fight too. I didn't follow MMA at the time, but there was one weekend where there were more people watching an MMA fight than they were watching baseball in the US. And it was like
Hmm.
this big turning point because, baseball is like the national sport of the US. So it was like, holy crap, it went from this like niche sport. It still feels niche, but now it's like it's kind of gotten mainstream with the proper, when you get when you get people who follow mainstream sports to watch your sport, then you're kind of doing something right.
Yeah, and there was another tweet like from that fight week, the previous one where Kayla Harrison fought on. He put up a tweet that says, "It is clear from UFC 306." Maybe it was after UFC
Hmm.
307. He says PFL female division would crush the UFC. So he's proposing this
Oh
like
yeah, yeah,
competition, right? I am
cross.
so confident the winner take all PFL. There'd be like a four women tournament, basically a
Yeah,
Grand Prix tournament thing. PFL Cyborg versus Pachenko, the winner of that. faces the winner of Harrison versus Pena,
Mhm.
and each fighter gets $2 million, and the losing company pays $8 million total fight purses. So if the PFL fighter wins, then the UFC pays 8 million, and then he hashtags it Dana scared, right? Like Dana's not scared. Dana has way more money. Like he could put that up himself. Like he has that money.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? Like he's not scared. It's just why why do it with them? You know, when it's gonna cost him money.
right.
You know what I mean? Why do it with them? But he's like really reaching, and this is kind of an example of what he was talking. Like it contradicted his tweet about like Dana is gonna announce something, but he's trying to draw attention from the UFC events to the PFL.
Mhm.
And you know what I mean? They're contradicting. I have no problem with that. You do what you do. Like it's like fighters. Like remember I told you, like fighters you should say whatever the hell you want in interviews and just say your truth. It doesn't even matter if it's
Absolutely.
manufactured. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, because people are gonna write headlines
Definitely.
on it. You know, look at Ilya Tapori. He just says the wildest shit and just it's all over the place.
That's true. Yeah.
Have you noticed?
Yeah, there's no enforcement to be truthful whatsoever in the fight
No.
game. And like you can spew complete nonsense. And I think people in MMA are kind of known to be like unhinged anyways, right? So people kind of take it with a grain of salt. So it's just like, all right, go ahead and say whatever you want, and whether someone believes you or not, like that's a different discussion, and whether that's healthy long term for the world is also a different discussion. But if you're trying to grow, right, everything's fair game. Whatever comes out of your mouth, in a lot of cases, you don't even have to take responsibility for it. You just fucking spew.
And when you look at the four female fighters, right? Cyborg, Chris Cyborg, Larissa Pachenko, Kayla Harrison, and Juliana Pena, right? PFL actually has the better fighters, I think.
Mm,
When you got Pachenko who beat Harrison, and you got Cyborg who's one of the best female fighters of all time, arguably the best female fighter of all time, right? And you got Pena and Harrison. If you rank those fighters, I would think like it's you know I think maybe Cyborg is one, Pacheco two, Harrison three, and Pena is four. Which mean Don Davis knows like
hmm.
someone like guided him through the scary team because I don't think he knows. I don't think he's even watched their fights probably.
Yeah,
To be honest with you.
right. Because then he has he made a similar tweet about like some of the men's divisions? I suspect not.
Nah,
Yeah,
I don't think
right.
so.
So like,
His focus is on just like Francis Ngannou and Kayla Harrison. That's what he talks about the most. Like that's his like love children or
yeah,
something. I don't know what it
yeah, I
is.
hear you.
Um, but like people always say like they're always proposing these like super fights, right? These like tournaments and stuff, and they want to do cross promotion and people say, oh, it's never going to be possible. But I'll give you one scenario where it will be possible in Saudi Arabia because they have the money to put the fights together.
Yeah.
So like this fight that they want, like this John Jones versus Francis Ngannou super fight, right? Two giants, the real battle of the giants, right? And the UFC heavyweight champion versus the PFL heavyweight champion, right? Saudi Arabia could put that fight together. I think
Mm,
Dana has a relationship with Saudi Arabia. PFL clearly has a relationship with Saudi Arabia. If they could find somebody in Saudi Arabia, the Turk or what I don't the Turk, the Sheik or
yeah.
whatever who that person is, the prince or the king, I don't know, man. Like to be honest with you, but the guy that has the money and it's like bottomless pit of
You're
money. Like they
right.
have so much money, right? They could put up the money to put that together. And I think Dana, if you give him 300 million, 100 million, 200 million, like the Conor McGregor Floyd Mayweather situation, because he said, "Oh, I'll never do boxing like that." But then the money came and he changed his mind.
Yeah.
Same thing. Saudi Arabia, I think, will be able to do that, and maybe Don Davis is. That's why he's trying to pull at the UFC like this all the time because he behind the scenes he's talking with Saudi Arabia
Mm,
and he's telling them to talk with Dana, and then let's see if we could put these super fights together.
right.
What do you
Yeah,
think?
I hadn't thought about that, but it makes so much sense to get like an independent third party that knows both sides and has a standing relationship with both. Just because if you're trying to do any kind of cross promotional event, then like from a logistics standpoint, someone's got to host it. Which and whoever's hosting it, whichever organization, right? So like if in this case, if either the UFC is hosting it or PFL is hosting it, then someone's gonna win from, or someone's gonna have a much better benefit from one of these two. Where if you do it with where it's like, well, the UFC would probably never allow the PFL to host one of their fighters and stuff, and then just carry their basically take advantage of like their reach, from like a viewership standpoint, where if you give it to a third party person who can organize, or third party organization that can organize the event independently of the two, then it will feel like there's more of an aspect of fairness to it, whether or not that's completely true or not. I'm not 100% sure, but that would make a lot of sense. Just somewhere in like the UAE or Saudi Arabia, get some independent people to be able to throw some money down on it, and then there's still going to be a lot of negotiations put in place, I'm sure, um, but that might be the way to go. Just to just to make it so then the UFC is not hosting it, PFL is not hosting it. Let somebody else take care of that, and then the fans win because they get to see those dream matchups.